Okay, we acknowledge that we're on the lands of the Stolo Salish peoples. And we look for the day when we can be in perfect reconciliation with them. Friends, I want to comment on a question that was raised. Why did I choose these women? I don't think I've given a very good answer to that. I want to try again briefly. I've studied world religions and world history. These women jump out at me when I think of exemplars, that is, people who lived admirably good lives and had special moral, spiritual awareness. So they jumped out at me when I considered, the whole, say, 3,000 years of human history. Now, there were some people I considered that I didn't put in there because they're sort of controversial, and like Madame Blavatsky or Simone Weil, Mary Baker Eddy, a woman named Evelyn Underhill, who's a scholar of women mystics, but is not herself a mystic necessarily. So I picked women who are mystics, but who made significant contributions. And the closer you get to the present, the harder it is to do this. This is something it's easier to assess people historically at a distance. We can see how important they are as the centuries go by. It's not so easy to figure that out with contemporaries. I chose Barbara Marx Hubbard. She's the last one because of her futuristic orientation and her productivity over a long period of time. Anyway, okay. So today we look at Teresa of Avila, and again, I'm sorry for my voice. I hope I sound reasonable to you. She, of all the women we've looked at, here's my theory about her. If we met her, we would find her easier to talk to than all of the other ones. It would be easy to talk to her because she had what, some Jewish families call the gift of the gab. She was able to talk to almost anyone about anything. And that was because she spent 28 years in a convent, which was very aristocratic most of the time. In other words, it wasn't very spiritually discipline oriented. The nuns were essentially like they were travel agents. They talked to people who were visiting, right? So they would talk to important people or wealthy people who were traveling by and wanted to take a look at the convent. And there was very loose discipline. The women could dress any way they wanted. They didn't have to stay in the convent. So if you can imagine that's very different than you think of, say, the situation in which Julian of Norwich was, right? Or different than Hildegard. Very different. Okay, and that's also why she wanted to reform the convent. She wanted to reform the whole Carmelite movement. I'm basically going to go down the first page, fairly quickly, the bio of this woman. We call her a monastic reformer, founder of the Barefoot Order of Roman Catholicism. She set up 17 convents. That's an incredible achievement because there was resistance to her reforming these convents and forming new ones. She could overcome that resistance with her charm, her amazing ability to get people laughing and see the foibles of human nature. She was a very, very persuasive person. You could count on her, you could depend on her. She had credibility. Okay, she was a patroness of Spain and a writer of spiritual classics. She was canonized a saint, and she even became a doctor of the church. That's very unusual. In other words, the Roman Catholic Church decided her wisdom was for all ages and all times in the future. Took them a long time to come to that conclusion about her, but still, they did come to that conclusion. Her father had a Jewish background, and her father converted to Catholicism. There was a special process that he was called a converso. That is, he had converted, and people who were converted like that were suspect. people thought they're not sincere. They're just doing that so that people will like them. And he was a wealthy guy in the woolen industry, and he could sort of buy his way into respect. He had a big family. Teresa's mother was from the old Christian families of northern Spain. And she grew up moderately wealthy, a comfortable existence. She was the third of 10 children. You know, during most of the time, we're talking about Spain. Spain was a superpower in the world at this time, in the 1500s. In fact, you could say Spain and China were the rulers of the whole world at that time. They were the superpowers. So Spain was very wealthy. Spain had been united. Spain had conquered the Muslims. Spain was starting to, investigate the whole rest of the world and convert people to Christianity and discover gold. And if it wasn't for the British, the British defeated the Spanish Armada. It looked like Spain was about to overtake Spain and overtake England and France. It was going to be the ruler of all of Europe, it looked like. Okay. As a child, Teresa wanted to see God. Very intense. She wanted to see God, and she thought, well, I'll just give myself to the Moors. There were still Moors, that is Spanish Muslims. She says, I'll just give myself over to them, and they'll capture me and kill me, and then I'll get to see God. That's a little insight about how did she think. Her father sent her to a boarding or finishing school, which is a monastery, not a monastery, a convent. You see, convents were not necessarily purely religious organizations in this day. You remember the Protestant Reformation is going on at this point in the middle of the 1500s. And the Roman Catholics had their own Reformation going on. That's called the Counter-Reformation. They were trying to clean up their own act. And it turned out this Teresa of Avila wanted to speed it up faster than the Counter-Reformation folks. She wanted to even reform it faster than they were doing it. At the age can you imagine, from age 20 to age 40, she's living this very undemanding existence. She's having a lot of fun. She's talking to the tourists. She's charming everybody. She's well-read. She's reading the Christian classics. She can talk to anyone about anything, but she's feeling kind of miserable because she thought, this can't be what life is all about. She started to convert to a strong form of Christianity at age 40. She read St. Augustine's Confessions. And she read another book here that was very popular at the time called The Spiritual Alphabet. Can you imagine a book, it was all about spiritual discipline, how to pray, how to monitor your virtues, how to live a good life, how to be disciplined. She started reading these things and she says, I need this. I really need this. So I'm looking down on the notes. It says age 43, she started to have visions, quite a significant number of raptures and visions. And she was told by priests that these were demonic. And she says, oh, I didn't realize they're demonic. Can we get some second opinions about this? So some Jesuit priests, the word Jesuit, these were the Marines of God at the time. Very well respected priests. She said, let them assess me. And they did. And they said, no, these are not demonic possessions. You're having genuine spiritual experiences. This is for real. You should write these down. And so they defended her effectively. The Jesuits defended Teresa of Avila. Okay. At age 44, she felt like an angel of God was piercing her with an arrow, a flaming arrow. And that became a famous sculpture in the next century called the Transverberation. And it looks almost sexual. It's sort of like some kind of ecstasy that she's going through, being stabbed with the arrow, but it almost looks sensual too. Okay, age 45, she made a very firm decision. She says, I'm going to work toward perfection, not only for myself, but for everyone who calls themselves Roman Catholic. It's called the Way of Perfection. She wrote a book on that. In other words, everybody should have spiritual and moral discipline. Everyone should get rid of all their defects, systematically do this. Can you imagine her deciding she's going to do this, age 45? 2 years later, she gets permission from the Pope to undertake this Reformation process, to reform Carmelite convents. And she did one a year for something like 17 years. It's unbelievable. That's a huge accomplishment. Spain was proud of her. So she says the way to make a more perfect convent is to get rid of this aristocracy thing. You see, you know who they were accepting as nuns? People from rich families. In other words, it was not a meritocracy. It was whoever could lobby the most persuasively with their money or their political power. That's who would end up a nun or a priest. In other words, the Catholic Church actually did need reforming. And she saw all that with crystal clarity. She says, okay, I'm going to help with this reform, starting with myself. I'm going to purify, become a more whole person. And so she does this. Now, at age 52, she met this guy, Saint John of the Cross. You know, one of the themes of this course was behind every great woman is a good man. Mm-hmm. He's the good man behind the great woman, although some would say he's great too, Saint John of the Cross. In fact, some of his writing is some of the best Spanish literature available, some of his poetry. Anyway, so he's a young man. He's only 25, and he's loaded with talent, intellectual and spiritual talent. He wants to meet Teresa because she has a well-established reputation of going the way of perfection. So she's twice his age. And when she was 57, something happened that they called a spiritual marriage between John of the Cross and Teresa of Avila. Now, this would make a really good movie. Probably there is a movie about this. I don't have a clue what really happened. It was probably not a romance. It was probably they loved each other's souls and they worked together. And I think John of the Cross saw her as having all the experience and maturity that he was studying about. Like he was a scholar and he knew all about theories of spiritual growth, but it looked to him like she was the exemplar of such. And then she learned from him some of the vocabulary. How do you describe these spiritual stages? Okay. So Teresa of Avila wrote 4 great classics. Interior Castle, that's the book we're looking at. The Book of Life, which is like an autobiography. The Way of Perfection and Foundations, or how to set up a convent to reform it. Okay, she established at the age of 63, she established with John of the Cross the first reformed monastery. I didn't say convent. In other words, she worked with John of the Cross to set up a monastery. She'd already been setting up convents, and she helped organize a reformed monastery. That's for men, for monks. Okay. And she died at the age of 67 and was quite famous all over Spain. People were proud of her, and she'd overcome an enormous amount of resistance. You remember I told you she had the gift of the gab? She was highly persuasive. You know, she could talk to anybody, no matter how much credentials they had or their position in society, religiously, politically, economically, and charm them and persuade them about the need for reform, moral, spiritual reform everywhere. Okay. You know, on the second page of the notes, I mentioned she was beatified in the year 1614. In other words, 32 years after her death. Beatified means you're made a candidate for sainthood. They're nominating you officially for sainthood, and they want to think about it. And then she was canonized as a saint in 1622, 40 years after her life. And she became a doctor of the church in 1970. That's only, what, 50 years ago. Whereas her books were used as great classics to train priests and monks and bishops and archbishops for a long time. You know, even in other religions found out about Teresa of Avila, and so she studied there too, how to meditate, how to pray, how to make spiritual progress. Okay, on page 2, I show you something I think is quite interesting. There's a theory about creativity, even artistic creativity, that there's 4 stages. Incubation, that sounds like a baby, you know, incubation, then preparation, then illumination, and then expression. So these are 4 stages of creativity. Incubation means you're just going through life and you're wondering, you know, what are you going to be when you grow up? What are your gifts to the world? You don't really know. Preparation means you start to realize what you need to learn to give your gift to the world. Illumination means you're flashing with insights coming at you fast and furious. But that's still not the last stage. The last stage is doing something with all of those insights, writing them down, teaching them to people, changing institutions, creating works of art. That's a theory of creativity. It applies perfectly to Teresa of Avila. We could say her incubation period was from birth to age 40. We could say her preparation went on from 40 to 45, 5 years. From 45 to 52, she was flashing with insights. She was being illumined from all her work on perfection or spiritual growth. And then ages 52 to 67, 15 years of uninterrupted productivity in making new reformed convents and influencing the way Christians understood Christianity, you know, in Spain. In other words, she was reforming the whole Catholic Church. Okay, I'm only going to point out a few more things and then stop and ask you how you're doing on this and try to figure out how can we go through this very complex system of hers. There's 7 mansions inside the soul, right? So we got to get a sense of what are those mansions like, and they're in sequence. They're in a certain developmental sequence, and I think it'll make sense. And hopefully you've had a chance to look at some of this material. But briefly, under stages of prayerfulness, this was a well-developed understanding among Roman Catholics that prayerfulness goes through 3 stages. The stage of recollection, that's what they call it. It simply means that you pray as a way of gathering yourself together. In other words, the mind goes all over the place. You know, in the Eastern traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, there's lots of meditation. It's well understood that the mind goes everywhere. It's totally undisciplined. So the recollection part of prayer is where you're gathering together what she called the vagabond mind. You know, have you ever tried to think about something and then you think about something else and you think about something else and you say, what was I trying to do before? You see, this is typical consciousness, ordinary consciousness. So prayer is a way of focusing on your relationship to the divine and noticing how far you are from that, usually. How to get your act together and using verbal prayers. That you know, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That's a written prayer many Christians use, but there's other ones too. Okay, here's a deeper stage of prayer. After recollection comes quiet, the prayer of quiet. She says, this is true receptivity to God's presence. You're quieting. You don't even need words. It's beyond words. Infused grace, non-discursive prayer, that's called. And then there's one even higher than that. And that's where she calls it the union. The stage of union is where you're constantly in the presence of God, even if you're in the kitchen washing the pots and pans. You know, and she would say things like that. God is with you in the pots and pans. She would say, God can be anywhere. This is why she's funny. Her sense of humor. She can apply spirituality to anything. You know, cleaning a baby's diaper, right? Everywhere it's available. Okay. Now, something in the middle of page 2 is sort of the outline of the 7 mansions. I hope this makes some sense to you. And I'm using the categories that were used by mystics of the Middle Ages, the 3 basic categories. Purgation means cleaning yourself up, inner cleaning. After that comes illumination, that you get cleaned up, then you're ready to receive the light and the warmth of the divine. And then union means you become consistently walking in a new way, walking in the light of God. So those are 3 stages of mystical development: purgation, illumination, and union. So she's got 2 stages within purgation. I'm calling them humility and prayer. So one set of mansions is, we'll call it humility. And the next step, when you graduate from that, is prayer. Then the next 2 are in the illumination stage, right? And they are virtues. That's my name for this: virtues and graces. You know, virtues means hard work, hard moral, spiritual work. You're trying to be good. You're trying to be appropriate. You're trying to help people. You're trying to pray the right way. You're trying to please God. You're trying to get good marks in your grade book. I identify with this stage, virtues. I live there. Now, that's not the highest. That's only the 3rd stage up. After that comes what she calls graces. This is where God, she says, starts to help you. Up until that point, you're sort of being tested. What can you do on your own? And after 3 of those mansions, we'll talk about mansions later, why she chose that metaphor. Then comes graces. In other words, God's going to start pulling you. It's going to help you. Wow. And then the last 3, union, she gives you 3 stages of union. Betrothal in marriage. She's using the metaphor of a relationship. Betrothal to God. Intimacy with God. That's the 6th one. And then marriage to God. Okay. So, you know, she didn't actually give them these names. Harold did this. I had to come up with names for her mansions. But how she described them, these are good names, I think. So humility, first set, then prayer, then virtues, then graces, and then 3 having to do with marrying God: betrothal, intimacy, and marriage. Okay. Let me stop there. I don't, you know, you only got this material like 2 days ago. I don't know if you were able to suffer and read all of the stuff sent to you. It's in small print. I was trying to condense. Here's the book. You see this book? There's the classic Interior Castle of Teresa of Avila. You know, she was tall and pretty. Got to say more about her. 5'10", 5'11", 6 foot tall, slender, charming, can talk to anyone about anything. And then she decides at one point, I'm actually going to become perfect in the moral spiritual domain because this world really needs it. Why not me? Okay, I'm going to do it. That's utterly amazing. But she did not lose her charm. when she did this. You know, she could have become a very austere person. You know, perfection is pretty demanding. Yet she had a very charming way of approaching it. I got to tell you more about this book. Sorry to talk so much. I want to hear your reactions first. You know, this book, how did she write this book? The priest who was her supervisor says, okay, you need to write a book about moral spiritual development. You know more about this than anybody. So guess what? You're going to write a book. From 8 in the morning till noon, you're going to sit in this room over here and write the book until it's done. So it took her 6 months to do it. So every day, for 6 days a week, she is writing this book from 8 in the morning till noon. And the result is, you know, about 600 hours later, she's got a book that's a classic. And as she's writing it, she's saying things like, why are they asking me to do this? Why didn't they call on, you know, John of the Cross, some other scholar? All right, I'll do the best I can in the time available. Blah, 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 blah. She's actually writing some of this down like this. She's telling us what she's thinking and feeling. But nonetheless, it becomes a classic because she describes in detail what is going on in the soul. Okay. I got to know, first of all, have any of you heard of this lady before? Teresa of Avila. Okay, some of you have and some of you haven't.
Yeah.
Did you know that she was this charming, funny person? Or is that something completely new to you?
That's new.
That's new. Had she not been charming and funny, I don't think she could have, you know, reformed, you know, started 16 different convents and 1 monastery.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very tough things to do. Okay, so she pulls it off. Okay, well, a little bit more introduction, and then we'll go fast over these mansions. You know, this is so strange. She's saying the soul is a set of mansions. It's not just one big mansion. It's like there are sub-mansions inside the mansions. And she said it's made of crystal. And they're not, you know, some of them are to the side and low, and some are to the side, and and then there's a central mansion, right? Set of mansions in the middle where God lives. And this is all inside of you. Oh my goodness. And most people don't even want to go in there. They would rather hang out outside the mansions where the lizards are running around. You see, she lived in Spain, northern Spain, about 60 miles northwest of Madrid, and where water is scarce and there's lots of lizards. And she uses water as a metaphor to help us understand access to divine spirit. Are you having to get the water yourself? You know, go there, get a cup of water and bring it a long way. That's the hard work she calls virtues. Or does the water come to you naturally because you've earned it, right? And God is helping you, like a stream that's coming right to your door. How about a gentle rain that's always raining whenever you need it to be raining, right? Wow, that would be the ultimate. She said that, well, that is what happens in the 7th set of mansions. There's just a gentle mist of divine love all the time. Okay, but it takes some work to get there.
Was any of this part of her vision? Like, in the visions that you talked about, did she see any of this?
You know, she describes her visions left and right all over the mansions. The mansions idea hit her when she was sitting in that room where they said, you got to write something. Mm-hmm. So she said she was wondering, what am I going to tell them about the soul? And then this image hits her. It's like a whole bunch of mansions that are subset of the greatest mansion within you. She's trying to say, in other words, the soul is just so big, incredibly big. And there were these big castles in wealthy Spain. Remember, it's sitting on top of the world. So she's using analogies and metaphors that are all around her. Mansions, streams, dryness, aridity. That means dryness, not enough water in your throat or whatever. And lizards. And she said, okay, I'm briefly going to describe these mansions, and then we're going to read a few of them. We're going to read the details of a few of them, I think. But actually, the first one's really important. She describes the whole setup. Okay, any reaction so far? I'm hoping I'm making some sense. I'll tell you truthfully, I understand what she's talking about up through maybe 5 sets of mansions. And in the 6th one and the 7th one, she's talking about stuff way beyond my experience. But I believe her, right? So, in other words, she's been there. She's like someone who's describing spiritual experiences of many different varieties and altitudes that most people don't have a clue about. Some of them will seem very familiar. Okay. Any comments, questions, complaints?
Well, the middle mansion with
Right.
where God dwells, and the mist just coming naturally, or the rain just coming when you need it. That's very much like the description of the Garden of Eden, where there was no rain at the time of the first founding, and the mist came from the ground, or the source of moisture for all the plants came out of the ground. That sounds like what you just said.
Water as you need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's perfect. I decided to do something real quick. Look at page 6 of what I've given you, because I list the 7 mansions there. Just look at page 6, 7 mansions, right beside the 7 valleys. That's something in the Baha'i writings that we'll look at later. But I just want to look at these 7 mansions, okay? Humility, and here's my quick definition and summary. Realizing the poverty of the self and the world and entering the interior castle, right? So in other words, this is a decision. Life, there's something wrong with it. It's extremely unfulfilling and shallow and superficial. I'm going to go into the castle. So, okay, that's stage 1, humility. Houston, we have a problem, right? So you're admitting there's a problem in your life and in the world in general. And then second mansions is prayer. You develop the ability to pray. The third is you cultivate basic disciplines and gain initial moral activity, moral clarity. So you're specifically trying to do service. You're trying to be honest. You're trying to admit when you've made a mistake. You're trying to pray. You're trying to please God. You're treating God like a teacher who's right there watching you, and you're going to try to please the teacher. Right? So that's the third. I call it virtues for lack of a single better term. Then graces, receiving divine help in a palpable way. The soul is enlarged. You're in there now. And while you say, there's more in here than I realized. This soul is amazing. Whoa, I've got lots of exploring to do. And I'm getting help doing it. Okay, and then betrothal. Blessings abound at all turns, and the self begins to die. The self that you were used to going through the other sets of mansions is starting to disappear. Oh my goodness. Intimacy. Here, there's a bunch more divine favors along with tests, divine difficulties, or she calls them trials. Divine favors and trials come together in proportion. Oh my goodness. New powers emerge along with new tests. And then in the last one, she calls it unitive life with God. marriage, and service to humanity, selfless service. A very interesting feature of her is she says, basically, life is very simple. What you have to do is love God and serve human beings, right? Why did she have to write a fancy book to tell us that? To get there, to be able to do it, you have to clear out so much junk and open up to new things that it's a lot of work. Okay, so anyway, I hope you have a sense now of these stages or sets of mansions. And so we don't have to read all the details about these now that we got the whole picture. But I think we have to read the first one because she describes these mansions in general. And then I think we have to look at 6. That's the one where she goes into most detail about these new powers, new spiritual powers that we start to develop. Okay, Susan, can you go back to page 2 and read what I call the first chapter? You see, I have little numbers there. 1 means chapter 1. And then 2 means chapter 2, all under the first mansions.
First mansion. Okay.
Right. So
Sure.
Can you just read number 1 there? I began to think.
I began to think of the soul as if it were a castle made of a single diamond or very clear crystal, in which there are many mansions, just as in heaven there are many mansions, some above, others below, others at each side, and in the center and midst of them all is the chiefest mansion, where the most secret things pass between God and the soul. Many souls remain in the outer court of the castle, occupied by the guards. They are not interested in entering it and have no idea what is in that wonderful place or who dwells in it. So accustomed they have grown to living all the time with the reptiles in the outer court of the castle that they have almost become like them. The door of entry into this castle is prayer and meditation. Paralyzed souls without prayer live in great peril, very much absorbed in worldly affairs, full of 1,000 preoccupations. Eventually, they enter the first rooms on the lowest floor, but so many reptiles get in with them that they're unable to appreciate the beauty of the castle or to find any peace within it.
You know, this is actually the way the castles were. The outer part of the castle was not too different from what's outside the castle. The reptiles get in, right? Yeah, those lizards, the snakes, they get in there. Not as many as outside, but a few get in. Oh, okay. So she's describing, you're just warming up. You're getting in there. Mm-hmm. Okay. Comments? Or let's go into the second one. Let's read the second chapter of the you see, she's setting it up. Why am I using mansions and a castle? She's trying to give us some sense of that. Sally, can you read the second one? You willing to read?
Yeah. This castle is beautiful and resplendent, an orient pearl, a tree of life planted in the living waters of life, namely in God. Fix your attention on the center, the room occupied by the king. Since God has given the soul such dignity, it must be allowed to roam through these mansions and not to be compelled to remain in a single room for a long time, unless it is the room of self-knowledge. Without humility, all will be lost. The soul must sometimes emerge from self-knowledge and soar aloft in meditation upon the greatness and majesty of God. Humility is the way to make progress. We shall never succeed in knowing ourselves unless we seek to know God. If we turn from self towards God, our understanding and will become nobler and readier to embrace all that is good. True perfection is love of God and neighbor.
Okay, so this is her introduction, right? She's describing the decision to enter into the castle, which most do not make. Most people don't do this. If they do, these are some of the things that they start to notice and some of the requirements, humility, prayer, etc. Okay. Now, prayer and virtues, the next two sets of mansions, I'm hoping you have a sense of that. I know I really have a sense of that third one, the virtues. This is where you're specifically trying to improve yourself all the time. You know, you're looking in the mirror and you say, I don't know anything about this, and I know I should know something about it. So I'm going to learn something about it, and I'm going to practice it, and I'm going to go through being awkward and clumsy until I get a little smoother at it. I hope people notice that I'm improving, especially God. I hope you can see that I'm improving. This is you see, that's what it's like in that third set of mansions there. And she says something interesting about that. She says, your prayers will get very arid. That is, no juice. If you're too stuck on your own effort and not relaxing and being humble enough. In other words, your ego is still in there, very strong. You're pushing yourself with your ego to improve. And you'll be saying these prayers and you'll say, how come they don't feel very juicy? And she said, well, that's because you're in the third set of mansions, that you're not getting the water yet, right? You're not humble enough yet. You don't know that you need help. You think you can do it all yourself. Okay, this is the way she would be coaching you as a spiritual coach. All right, now, okay, who else can I pick on to read? Joan, would you willing to read the fourth mansions?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, it's got 3 little chapters. Yeah, okay.
Fourth mansions, graces. 1, we now begin to touch the supernatural. There are such exquisite things to be seen and appreciated that the understanding is incapable of describing them. Worldly joys have their source in our own nature. Spiritual consolations have their source in God. The understanding is one of the faculties of the soul. The soul may be wholly untied with him.
Oh, united.
United, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
The soul may be wholly united with him, while thought remains in the outskirts of the castle, suffering the assaults of 1,000 venomous creatures. You want me to go on?
Yeah, keep going. Now we're talking about, she's using the water metaphor now. Where do you get the water? How hard is it to bring it to yourself? Okay, go ahead.
First water comes from a long distance by means of numerous conduits and through human skill. Second water flows all the time and comes directly from its natural nearby source, heavenly water from our very depths, producing ineffable blessings, like human metal versus the purest gold of divine wisdom. 3, prayer of recollection. Senses and faculties have gone out of the castle and for a time have been consorting with strangers, to whom all the good things in the castle are abhorrent. But the great king, a good shepherd, teaches them how to know his voice and not get lost, but to return to their mansion. Enlargement of the soul takes place, for the water of life has nowhere else to flow.
In other words, she's saying, up until this point, we get distracted. There's always that outer world full of the lizards and temptations and trivial pursuits that's clamoring for your attention. But by the time you get to the fourth mansions, the shepherd, capital S, right, or Jesus or God or the Holy Spirit starts to help you and say, I'm bringing you back to attention, which is, the process of perfection and helping others and serving others. That's what really matters in life. The rest is distractions. Okay, so that's sort of the description that God starts to help you very directly in that fourth set of mansions. Now, then the fifth and sixth and seventh, wow. See, it's like realms open up that were undreamt of. Okay, so we have to try to get a little glimpse of what she says here. Who else? Linda, can you read? Oh, she's got something in here called the silkworms. Let me explain. The other superpower of the day was China. Spain got silkworms from China. With silkworms, you can make silk. And silk is a very majestic material. And then she happens to know about mulberry trees and silkworms, and they go through a transformation. They start out looking kind of ugly, and gradually they become this incredible white butterfly. Oh my good. Oh, and then they can fly into other realms. So she's going to use that. Something like that happens in this fifth stage. Okay, Linda, can you read 1 and 2?
Yes. Okay. Fifth mansions,
Yes.
betrothal. Chapter 1. It is possible for us to enjoy heaven on earth. God will grant us his help. The soul completely dies to the world so that it may live more fully in God. A death full of delight in order to come closer to God. Lizards cannot enter. Since this is union with God, the devil cannot enter. The joy here is greater than all of the joys on earth. We learn that God is in all things by presence and power and essence, but we cannot enter by any efforts of our own. His majesty must put us right in the center of our soul. Silkworms feed on mulberry leaves until they are full grown. Then they start spinning silk cocoons in which they bury themselves. Finally, the worm, which is ugly, comes out a beautiful white butterfly, like the soul, which takes its own life in the house of Christ, and through the Holy Spirit begins to utilize the general help which God gives to all. Let us renounce our self-love and self-will and our attachment to earthly things. Let us practice penance, prayer, mortification, obedience, and all the other good works. Let the silkworm die, for it becomes the beautiful white butterfly. It has wings now. How can it be content to crawl along slowly when it is able to fly? It feels a stranger to things of the earth. It should be seeking a new resting place. There are more tears and sorrows because there are greater capacities in services to God.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we should keep on trucking and finish this one. Yeah. Okay, keep going. Our duty now.
Our duty now is to continue living this present life, yet to die of our own free will. You must not doubt the possibility of this true union with the will of God. His will is that we should be altogether perfect and be one with him. Lord asks only 2 things of us: love for his majesty and love for our neighbor. Love for our neighbor has its roots in the love of God. Spiritual betrothal. A rough comparison to matrimony. Attraction leads to a discussion about whether or no they are suited to each other, and is it really love? The contract is drawn up. Each is determined to do all the will of the intended spouse, but the devil causes self-love to increase. We forget our trivial earthly pleasures when we fix our eyes on the reward.
I noticed something about this. She said before that the devil cannot enter this set of mansions. And now she says the devil causes self-love to increase. But you're not supposed to be hyper-rational about this. But you see, my mind keeps on. I don't think she's contradicting herself. So the devil doesn't enter directly, but the devil still can work from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
He's not there in those fifth mansions, but he has these telepathic skills,
Mm-hmm.
right, to bother you even there. So that sort of fits with it. I think she's saying there you can still be tempted even though you're making this incredible spiritual progress, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and then even in the next set of mansions, what she calls intimacy, which I call intimacy, trying to mirror her. There are other challenges too. Oh my goodness. Okay, any comments, questions?
Well, I noticed that she says that you can't willingly enter this mansion, that God puts you in this place. Like
You are pulled there after having busted your butt in the other 3 sets of mansions. That's how I read it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting because that's parallel with, the Baha'i and Islamic theories of spiritual development are pretty parallel. They also use 7 like this, very similar, and they say a similar thing. At that 4th one, you start to be pulled.
Mm-hmm.
You start to, for example, you're looking hard for God, or you're looking hard for meaning, or you're looking hard for purpose. Suddenly, it's jumping out at you everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's now in your face. So that's what she's describing. The water that you were trying so hard to get, your prayers were arid. You were gonna, do all this hard work to go get a bucket of water and bring it over some distance. Now the stream comes right to your front door.
Mhm. It's
Right?
like grasping.
The second water, she calls that. And there's even third water and fourth water where you always get the amount you need in the last set of mentions. Any other comments, questions, observations?
Well, that part that you were just talking about, it's like grasping and, if you're trying too hard, like in transcendental meditation, for instance, the harder you try, the more elusive the transcendence is. So the transcendence only comes when you stop trying.
Letting go, right? So that's a big piece of this. And that is hard to let go when the meaning of your life is deliberate effort. But actually deliberate effort is so fantastically far ahead of, say, the reptile stage, right? Or not even going in the castle. That's what's very advanced, right? But to make progress beyond that, you have to develop some of this receptivity ability, right? Or opening up, or I've done what I can now. I'm open for help, right? I'm open for guidance from a higher power, higher source. Okay, very good. Now, all right, we guess we got to look at this sixth mansion. I get it's difficult. Some of this will make you get little flashes of insight of what she might be talking about, and other times, at least that's what happens to me. I haven't a clue what she's talking about. Okay, who can we pick on to read this? Donna. All right. Sixth mansion's intimacy. Oh, Donna, you're muted. We can't hear those gems of wisdom yet.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Intimacy. Greater favors bring greater trials. How holy she's getting and making the rest of us look more sinful. God sends grievous infirmities, periods of aridity. Best medicine? Occupy oneself with works of charity and hope for God's mercy. Chapter 2. God sometimes awakens us like a rushing comet or a thunderclap, though no sound is heard. Sometimes like a spark from a coal fire that touches the soul. Chapter 3. God speaks to the soul in locutions that seem to come both from outside and inside. Unless they are consistent with scripture, ignore them. Divine locutions have special power and authority, bring tranquility, remain in the memory. Each word contains a world of meaning, and more can be understood than the words.
Okay, let's stop here.
Okay.
A very silly little example of these locutions. You remember the movie Field of Dreams?
Mhm.
That guy, he hears a locution that is a statement. If you build it, he will come. Or something like that, right? That's a movie trying to show us, occasionally we hear these one-liners and we go, that sounds really important. It comes from a higher level of reality, but I don't know what it means yet. I'm all ears. Well, what is that trying to tell me? Or it could be a dream. Could be a dream passage or a dream image that you say, that really seems important. It's beyond me what it is, what it's trying to say. Okay, keep going. Let's do two or three more of these and stop. And yeah.
Number 4, like the phoenix, we may catch fire and spring into new life. Like for Moses and the bush, secrets may be revealed. All other doors of the castle may be shut while we're brought to where God dwells. We are transported to higher understanding and love. But this lasts for a short time only. 5, the spirit may seem to be transported with such speed that we are first filled with fear. The water rises quickly and carries us on a swift current. The soul seems to have left the body and travels to another world and shown fresh light. We are shown things that take years to integrate with our previous thoughts. We may see saints and angels. The sun of justice enables us to rise far above ourselves. We know the greatness of God. Self-knowledge and humility increase. There is a supreme contempt for earthly things. These are jewels the spouse begins to give his bride.
Okay, let's stop there.
Mhm.
Do you remember, we looked at Hildegard. Hildegard said sometimes she felt like she was being lifted up, looking down at the forest there in Germany, then looking and seeing continents, and then seeing the whole planet, and then going higher than that, and seeing celestial, realities. You remember her saying that? So this idea of rising up in consciousness, I think she's describing that. Sometimes that happens fast. And you're being shown things that it's going to take you a long time to even put words to and integrate with other things you think you know. I think she's sort of saying that. Okay, the Son of Justice. This is her term. I find it fascinating because that image comes up in Islamic writings and in Baha'i writings a lot. The Son of Justice. So it's like the source of light that shows you what is best for all. Wow, the Son of Justice. Okay, she has other images like this. Continue, raptures.
Raptures may come even in public. We become envious of those free to cry and proclaim abroad the great God of hosts and sing his praises. 7, we must cultivate companionship with the suffering of Christ, Mary, and the saints, contemplating their whole glorious lives, how they bore their trials so that we may bear them more perfectly. 8, the soul becomes conscious that Christ is near, but cannot see him, though he walks at her side for an extended time. Such companionship brings indescribable tenderness, but does not make us better than the rest. 9, imaginary visions. However evil the painter may be, we cannot fail to reverence the painting if it is of him who is our only good. 10, God reveals himself to us as sovereign truth. We must walk humbly in truth, in the presence of God and man, and not be reputed better than we are. And finally, our hungers and thirsts for God grow greater, bringing greater distress, yearnings, interior burning. But we are ultimately strengthened and lose the fear of any possible trial.
Something I think she's saying here is like in other mansions and even outside the mansion in the regular world, we have trials and pains and frustrations, and our attitude is, well, we want to get rid of this as fast as possible, right? We want to get rid of this pain and frustration. We want to solve the problem. We want to escape it. And she's saying you still have these trials in the 6th set, but you have a different attitude toward them. You say, oh, this problem, this trial is an opportunity to get to know more about divine reality and the nature of human existence and gain insights and learning. So you have a different attitude toward trials and tribulation. That's how I'm interpreting what she's saying. Number 9 there, imagine, I haven't a clue what she's talking about. I don't know what I read that chapter many times and couldn't make any sense of it. But okay.
I also can hear her calling for humility, that just because you're in the 6th doesn't mean you're any better than anybody else. There's
right.
Nothing to brag about here. There's still plenty of work to do.
She says that in all of the mansions, even this one. Oh my goodness. But I had a theory about this. You remember she had visions earlier on in life. Even as a little kid, she had some, and then her 40s, she has a few more. And the priest says, oh, those are demonic and this and that. And I think she's saying here something like, you see things that if you could paint them, you'd be considered a great artist. But they might think of it as demonic. They might not understand this. if it's demonic, it's there for a reason. It's to show how to overcome evil. Or I'm guessing. I don't know really know what she's talking about here, but I'm trying to look at, make a guess. She says, here's a line she used in this chapter: His Majesty, meaning God, the king, the chief of the castle, the shepherd, with a capital S. His Majesty is able to bring good out of evil. So I think she's saying, okay, you might get accused of weird insights and images, but there's some higher good that this is for. You may not know what it is. I'm only guessing. I'm groping around because in these chapters, she's saying all kinds of things that are very elusive, but yet you sort of maybe you can identify to some degree with them. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, could it be in number 9? However evil the painter may be, we cannot fail to reverence the painting if it is of him who, with a capital letter, you've got, is our only good. So, we look at the world and we see a lot of evil, and that's the painting that we see. So however evil that picture is, we can't fail to reverence the painting, because out of this mess, good will come, and out of adversity, usually good comes. So whatever we're picturing as the painting of adversity in our lives, then we don't know the good that's going to come out of that adversity.
You're getting as close as I could come to what she might be talking about right there. If you have this book, look at that chapter and see if you can figure it out. Very good. I like your hypotheses. One of the things she says here is that you see things that you are going to have trouble integrating with your other thoughts. They're from another realm, right? And it might take you years to be able to say it to anybody in a useful way. Because a lot of mystics report something like this. They said, oh, here's my best shot at telling you what I think I saw. Okay. And it's interesting to me, I study near-death experience too. Some people who clinically die and then come back and talk about it, they say similar things. They said, I saw some amazing stuff. I can't even begin to tell you. There are colors that I've never seen before. There are musical notes I've never heard before it's music, but it's not like anything we know. They're groping around to say something like that. The same thing with her. I think she's describing new spiritual capacities, insights about higher levels of reality. Okay. I guess we're to the 7th mansion. What time is it? 8 o'clock. Okay. Who hasn't read yet and might be willing to? We're back to Susan.
Okay, I can do
Susan,
it.
Read the first 2 chapters in the 7th mansions here, if you would.
Yep. Marriage. God's second heaven can be in our souls, in communion with him. Scales are removed from the eyes of our souls. We see that 3 persons are one substance and one power and one knowledge and one God alone. They are felt within as divine companionship. Spiritual marriage, united so that separation is no more, whereas betrothal had frequent separations. 2 wax candles are joined so that their light is one, yet they can be separated. From divine breasts flow streams of milk, which solace all who dwell in the castle. This tiny spring is swallowed up in the mighty river. Go in peace produces a state of pure spirituality. We are joined with uncreated spirit in celestial union. Though conflict, trial, and weariness remain, they do not rob the soul of its peace and stability.
We got to stop here. You see, the theologian part of me notices something like this term, uncreated spirit. That is a weird term unless you know the history of religion. So Buddha talked about the uncreated realm. And if we didn't have that uncreated realm, we couldn't escape from the suffering of this created realm. Oh my God, you see, so uncreated spirit. It's a very abstract idea. She's not famous for being a theologian, but she's just trying to put in words things that she thinks she sees up there, so to speak. It's very amazing. And she has a little bit of the Trinity here. She's trying to tell us that there are like divine breasts that give you milk. You remember that Julian made Jesus very feminine. Well, here we have Teresa of Avila turning God into a mother in a way. Oh my goodness. And she got away with it in the patriarchal church. This is still considered a great classic. Okay, any comments, questions? If not, two more chapters.
Okay, so number
3.
3. She must take care of his business and he will take care of hers. There is great desire to suffer for his sake. Persecution brings interior joy. No enmity is born to those who ill treat. Death is no more feared than rapture, but there are no more raptures. To be alone or service to souls are the only desires. The temple continues to be built, but no noise is heard. Nothing can frighten the soul, now enlarged and equipped. I love that phrase, enlarged and equipped.
Equipped.
Yeah, I love it. The soul delights in the tabernacle of God. There are no lack of crosses, but these do not unsettle or deprive of peace. We are granted a life in which an imitation of the beloved Son, not honors, but good works are the aim. Martha and Mary must work together when they bring the Lord lodging. We must not build towers without foundations. The Lord does not look so much at the magnitude of what we do as at the love with which we do it.
And that's how she ends, right? There's a kind of a moral twist at the very end. Like earlier, she said something like, there's only 2 things to worry about. I want to either be alone or I want to be of service to souls. That's it. What else did she say? There are all these crosses and challenges, but they don't threaten you. You go, hallelujah. Okay, another chance to learn or serve. My goodness. Okay. At another point, she said, it's on the first page of notes somewhere. She said something like, I'm reading at the bottom of the very first page. I look down upon the world as from above and care very little what people say or what is known about me. Mm-hmm. So this is after she's gone into this path of perfection. At a certain point, you say, I'm just doing what I have to do in relationship to God. I don't worry about what will people think. The other traditions call this detachment. You're attached to higher things. You're detached from any, need for love and respect or this or that, or wearing the right shoes or anything like that, right? Okay, any reactions to this? I think at the very end, she's talking about Mary and Martha have to work together. I think, you see, Martha is the symbol of practical service and work. Mary is the symbol of wanting to bask in the spiritual vastness of the Lord, right? Or the higher realms. Mary and Martha have to work right together. God is in the pots and pans. You never outgrow the need to be of service. God wants you to be of service right up to the very end. That's what I hear her saying. Okay. Comments, questions, complaints about all this?
It's interesting because Mother Teresa, another Teresa,
yes,
her writings are so much like this last paragraph here. Like she was like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do big things. it's about the love that you do it with. Right?
You're very right. I know those little quotes from Mother Teresa of Calcutta.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. You
So I
see,
wonder if there's a Teresa connection there.
Interesting. Well, all nuns and priests have to read Teresa of Avila, Interior Castle.
Well, I was wondering,
they have to read this. Yeah.
If any of these mystics, as we move forward in time, if these women were knowledgeable, or if they had, I mean, we may never know, but like if they had studied the great female mystics before them, like how they might have been influenced.
In this case, we know that, we know that about Teresa. Remember, she starts feeling restless. She's in that convent and, everything is so easy and all you're doing is hanging out with people. And she starts reading. She read Thomas à Kempis. She probably read Julian of Norwich. I don't know that. I'm just guessing. She starts reading serious stuff. She read St. Augustine, City of God, Confessions. She read that thing called the Modern Devotion Movement, the Spiritual Alphabet. She not only read these things, she says, what can I do to actually implement this wisdom? I'm going to actually get perfect at it. That was like a commitment. I will do this. I'm going to work full time on it. I've been lazy long enough. For 20 years, I've been just riding the coattails of all this wealth and pomp and circumstance. Never again. Oh. Okay. Any other reactions to all of this?
It seems like a big jump to me from the 6th mansion to the 7th mansion, where, you're still reacting or responding to the, trials and tests in the world in the 6th mansion. And then by the 7th mansion, those distractions just go away.
That's right. You're not married yet.
That's a big step. That's a big, like a big step or a big change. Or
I'm glad you see that. Yeah, yeah. The difference between intimacy dynamics and marriage dynamics with God, right? So that's solid. You know, you're committed, you're in for the long haul, and you're getting help wherever you need it. And you can handle any challenge. Wow.
And I also have,
sorry.
I also had a question about in the 6th mansion, about 2/3 of the way down with chapter 6, where it says we become envious of those free to cry and proclaim abroad the great God of hosts and sing his praises. I had a question about that, because by the 6th mansion, it seems to me that she might be beyond that.
I hear what you're saying. My rational mind finds little mini inconsistencies. But one place she said, these mansions are a little bit intertwined. She said that at one point, like things that happen in one set are a little bit like what happened in the previous set or something like that. But don't worry about that too much. She says, keep meandering among them and making progress over the long haul. You remember early, she said, the soul, you have to be free to explore the interior castle. Don't feel like you have to stay in one room, one set of rooms for an infinite amount of time. Move around, get to know the possibilities. Very flexible, it seems to me. She's saying, another thing I haven't shown you yet, page 5 was about St. John of the Cross. I just want to get across this idea of the dark night of the soul. This is really important. Okay. In using just her categories, where does the dark night of the soul? It starts in the betrothal stage, halfway through the 5th set of mansions, and all the way through the intimacy. This is Harold's theory. The dark night of the soul is in all of those areas. And the dark night of the soul is where God says, in order for you to grow, I'm going to have to disappear for a little bit and let you struggle by yourself. Right? That's the basic. I'm trying to put it in the vernacular. Look at John of the Cross, his language on page 5. Up near the top, it says dark night, a necessity for spiritual growth. It's got 3 stages of the night: the fading of the light, the total darkness, and then the pre-dawn coming of the light. Like if you actually pulled an all-nighter, you would experience these types of darkness. So this is a spiritual version of that process. Okay, dark night of the soul. And using that page 6, where I have the 7 valleys lined up with the 7 mansions, the halfway through contentment and all through wonderment would be what Baha'is call tests, trials, tribulations, and triumphs. There just happen to be all T's there. Tests, trials, tribulations, and triumphs as part of, that's another way of saying dark night of the soul. Those are severe tests, but they bring with them triumphs. The light, in other words, I guess one reason to suffer in darkness is to really appreciate what light is. How else would you really know? You might start taking light for granted. Okay, so the dark night of the soul is presupposed in everything that she's saying about the 5th and 6th mansions, those tests and difficulties and crucifixions or whatever you want to call them. They remain, and they're for a very high purpose. But at that point, you know that. You're not alarmed by that. So the Baha'i version of that is tests, trials, tribulations, and triumphs all come together. Remember that along with the tests, trials, and tribulations, the triumphs are integrated. There's no cheap way to have the triumph without all the other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's what's being said. Okay, who likes to read poetry? I want to quickly, we're running out of time. There's just 7 minutes left, but some of this writing of St. John of the Cross is utterly amazing. Look at the one on page 5. There's something there called the fountain. Well, there you go with water again. The fountain, here's what he means. It's the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the fountain. All the water in the universe is in that fountain. Oh my goodness. But look how he integrates this with the dark night. So let me try to read this, okay? How well I know that flowing spring in black of night. That's the next line, in black of night. The eternal fountain is unseen. How well I know where she has been in black of night. The Holy Spirit is feminine here, just like in the book of Proverbs. And remember Hildegard. Okay. I do not know her origin, none, yet in her all things begin in black of night. I know that none can wade inside to find her bright bottomless tide in black of night. Her shining never has a blur. I know all light comes from her in black of night. I know her streams converge and swell and nourish people, skies and hell in black of night. The stream whose birth is in this source, I know has gigantic force in black of night. The stream from but these two proceeds, yet neither one I know precedes in black of night. She calls on all mankind to start, to drink her water, though in dark, for black is night. O living fountain that I crave, in bread of life I see her flame, in black of night. So I'm just saying that's a poem we're studying for a couple of years. And it's flashing with insights about the Holy Spirit on one hand and the result and the need for the darkness to fully appreciate the Spirit. So yeah, he's very, I mean, if you take a literature class, you might end up with some of John of the Cross's poetry, just for its literary value. Even in English, it sounds pretty good. He wrote in Spanish. Okay. All right, friends, anything else for the good of the order?
I'd just like to offer a suggestion. I recently finished reading a book called Learning to Walk in the Dark by Barbara Brown Taylor, which is a very interesting exploration and much of these themes of in the dark night of the soul. She was a former Episcopalian priest, I think, but she's moved along and away from that. And it also makes me think, in reading her book and in reading much of what we've shared today, that in Taoism, it has to do with light and dark, and that you have to have both to have.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love those cross-cultural comparisons.
Yeah, yeah.
You feel like you're getting at reality perceived from different metaphors and cultures. You know, here's the book this one's called Entering the Castle and Finding the Inner Path to God and Your Soul's Purpose, Carolyn Meese.
Oh, yes.
Remember Carolyn Meese, like she's written several books trying to enable you to practice what Teresa is teaching. Those exercises and things like that. It's highly correlated with creativity. You know the theory of creativity I gave you in the beginning? The, what did I call it? Incubation, preparation, illumination, and expression. This is where you actually, wow. So, creativity and spiritual moral growth got a lot of similar dynamics in them. And so the expression thing never became unimportant to Teresa of Avila. Like, it's not done until I do something with all this bounty I've been shown. I have to do something. Right at the very end, she's still saying, Mary and Martha have to work together. I'm not saying that I want Martha to become Mary. No. I want Mary and Martha to work together. Right? Any type of real creativity or contribution to the world requires both.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, friends?
Well, I just had one thought about where you're saying about tests, trials, tribulations, and triumphs.
Yeah.
And just the last couple of weeks, I've been concentrating on redemption and judgment and redemption and so that would fit right into that, the kind of, trials and tribulations and then triumphs of the whatever disciplines happen, and then redemption.
I like the fact that she balances this out. Like, a lot of theological systems, especially in Christianity, emphasize sin too much. It seems to me. They don't ever fully balance it out. And I feel like she is balancing it out. I feel like Julian of Norwich was balancing it out, right? We studied her, what was it, two sessions ago. Okay. And, Sukhmani, we did Mirabai last time. And, Mirabai hung around with early Sikhs and was revered by them. So it was sort of like a lesson in Sikhism and the attempt to reform Hinduism and Islam in India way back. It was an exciting period. And how Mirabai still has a whole lot of interest now, in India and elsewhere. Any people that find out about her say, "Whoa, she's amazing." Another thing about all these women we're studying, they had the ability to write and, they could somehow express very difficult experiences, sometimes, very poetically. In the case of Teresa of Avila, she wouldn't say she's a great writer. She would just say, I'm just trying to explain my experiences. I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to use lizards if I have to. I'm going to use water. I'm going to use castles and mansions. Whatever it takes, it's up to you to make progress in it. And she even says, I wouldn't have written this book if the priest didn't make me sit in this room. I'm really glad the priest did that. Oh my goodness. Like, for 4 hours, you write the book. 6 months later, it's done. Now we have all this stuff. Amazing. Really amazing.
Did she have the same, she didn't have the same, history as Hildegard of being not recognized until just recently. She's been recognized for a long time, right?
Thank you. That is a huge difference. The only similarity is they didn't declare her a doctor of the church until 1970. That's really slow and stupid because they're using her book the whole time. Like it was an instant classic. They knew it was before she wrote it. The church decided we must make her write this. She's the only one who can. Yeah, so that's true though. No, so the Counter-Reformation was the Roman Catholics' attempt to respond to the criticism of the Protestants, as well as to clean up their own mess, right? On their own terms. So she is a major figure in the Counter-Reformation. To me, it's very certain the Catholic Church improved. It made some incredible achievements in response to the Protestant Reformation and in response to their own criticism. And here's Sister Teresa. I mean, she was watching how lazy the church was for 20 years. She's sitting there basking in glory. What kind of a life is this? What a waste of resources. I'm going to clean it up. Amazing. Okay, friends, I guess in a few weeks we do Tahirih. Tahirih is a Baha'i woman. That little model I gave you of the 7 valleys, we may look at that again. So that's sort of a Baha'i and to some extent an Islamic version of these 7 spiritual stages called valleys in this case. Also, Tahirih was a visionary. She saw the future and wrote powerful poetry. We'll look at 8 or 9 of her poems and unpack them. Okay, friends, thank you. I hope you can hear me. I didn't have a very good voice.
Yes.
It was good. It was excellent.
We got through. We got through.
And thank you for the notes. They're wonderful.
Oh, my
I really,
goodness.
really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad they work a little bit.
For
You just
sure.
read them slow and digest them. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, friends. Thank you so
Good
much.
night, Harold.
Thank you.
and
Good night,
thanks,
everyone.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.